The veteran comedian Eric Sykes has died after a short illness. Eric Sykes was a key figure in British comedy for the last 50 years. He was 89. For 20 years, his television series Sykes was one of the nation's most popular programmes. Nick Hyam looks back at his life and career.
Sat at that end of the table.
Long, lean and lugubrious, Eric Sykes was known to millions from the television series he wrote and starred in as the inoffensive chap in Sebastopol Terrace, coping with life's little problems, like a rogue pair of handcuffs. Sykes ran for 20 years, attracting up to 20 million viewers with the gentle and offbeat humour of Eric himself and Hattie Jakes as his sister.
Take it the whole way. But unfortunately, as you can see, it's a bit narrow even for me.
He was a Lancashire millworker's son whose career as a comedian and scriptwriter started in the forces during the war and developed in radio. On occasion, his comedy was pure slapstick. The Plank was written and directed by Sykes himself. A shy man, he was often happier behind the camera. He went deaf and wore special glasses which incorporated a hearing aid.
25 years I was on the stage and I was deaf as a post and I didn't hear a laugh. I didn't hear a laugh for 25 years and then I got these. I realised I haven't been getting any.
For a time, he was Britain's best-paid comedy writer. His career took him round the world, a man driven by a search for comic perfection who never lost his popular appeal.
I think it's an octopus.
Great jumping jellyfish, it's mine.
If I let it go and it hits bottom, it could blow this boat to smithereens.
That's not our fault, is it?
Eric Sykes, who's died at the age of 89. Well, John Plowman is an award-winning comedy producer behind hits like Absolutely Fabulous and French and Saunders and The Office, and he's here with us now, and thank you so much for coming in. Wow, what an extraordinary career that was.
He was a genius. He was absolutely extraordinary, and when I heard, I said, I think that was the last time I saw Eric was at a memorial service for Dudley Moore, as it happened. And somebody said to me, we should all die before Eric, because he was a wonderful improviser, and actually, in a way, his genius was both as a scriptwriter, at which he was excellent, but also as a man who could just do stuff off the cuff, which is why The Goons is so wonderful, and why I think some of Sykes' Ander is, all those things with Hattie. I suspect she didn't quite know what was going to happen. He was extraordinary. I remember the last time I saw him was at Dudley Moore's memorial service, where he stood up. We were in Magdalen College Chapel, Oxford, and he stood up. He was the last man to speak, and said, well, I didn't realise until today that Dudley Moore played the organ. I've never liked the organ. he then did 10 minutes on how much he hated the sound of the organ, and Dudley somehow got lost, but it was sort of appropriate. And also, I mean, it's terrible to sort of dwell on him as a figure of death, because obviously, without him, we don't get The Goons. Without him, you don't get sitcoms in the way that they are, because Sykes and whatever it was that week had an air of sort of surreality and also sort of classlessness that without which you wouldn't have had quite a lot of the sitcoms that followed. It wasn't a sort of homely northern thing. It was a brother and sister, which was kind of weird in the first place. And well, let's not go there. But it was a brother and sister living together. And almost anything could happen. Sometimes it involved a policeman played by Derek Geiler, and sometimes it didn't. But, and I remember him at Johnny Spate's memorial service, and as I say, I'm sorry to dwell on this, standing and saying, the vicar stood up and said, and now a few words from Eric Sykes. And Eric got up and stood next to the vicar, paused, turned to him and said, I'd sit down if I were you, Mum, sometimes. He really was one of a kind, and classless and funny and warm, and continued acting until doing quite serious things, doing things for the Peter Hall Company until really recently. And it's an extraordinary life. And we won't see his life like again, as it were.
Yes, it struck me that he was a very generous performer,
Yes.
and generous in the way he wrote, the way he liked writing for other people as much as performing. That's
Yes.
how he always came across to me, and the
Absolutely,
way he spoke
yes.
so affectionately all the time of Hattie Jakes, and always
Yes.
paid tribute to what a key part she was in everything they worked in together.
But generous, but always knowing that there was that you'd better have a twist at the end of the line. So I suspect he was sometimes generous in order to kind of see what would happen if he was that generous to the performer, see how much they would get, what trouble they would get into, and how he would get them out of it. Fantastic.
And was it a sort of a God-given talent? I mean, the ability to
suspect it
improvise
was.
that you
I don't
talked
know.
about.
You look at all those people who came out of the war or out of national service, and there was Spike, and there was Eric, and there was Harry Seacombe, and a list of others. I suspect it was. It never felt an effort. He was an effortless comedian. It never felt as if he was having to try hard or write hard. Wonderful.
And when you look at the list of who he actually wrote scripts for,
Yes.
Peter Sellers, Frankie Howard's, I mean, it's the royalty of British comedy.
It really is. It really is. And then there's films, The Plank, which is a silent comedy. I mean, you could say the guys who made The Artist nicked it from Eric Sykes. That's not fair. But, you know, a silent comedy made in the sound era that is very, genuinely very funny. You don't get many of those. He will be sadly missed. I liked him a lot, and you always felt he was a very warm man, and he was a very giving man. But and I know from his daughters that he was a very warm family man. He will be sadly missed.